All right, welcome back. We are COMP125 in the summer 2020 semester at Centennial, and it's week 12, part 2 of our broadcast. We're going to be talking about UI interactivity as we approach or take an approach to assignment number 4, which is our little slot machine. So last day, what I did was I gave you guys, let me just pull up our project. I'm going to talk about Texture Packer in a second too, as another tool. Let's take a look at our project from last day. So again, I'm going to pull up VS Code, and what I did was I kind of gave you guys this. We found some symbols as an example for a slot machine, and I gave you these symbols. And I showed you kind of how to get a group of symbols and, as an example, cut them up by hand and so on. There's some great tools out there that'll do it for you, and one of the tools that I like a lot, I'm going to put this up on GitHub later on, for any kind of slicing of sprite sheets and that kind of stuff, is something called Texture Packer. So if you look at Texture Packer, if you're someone who's going to make 2D games in the future, or any kind of animation work or anything like that, then Texture Packer is the tool for you. And I'm going to put this up there as a link that I recommend. Now, for you guys, most of you guys are not game developers, so here's the link for that, Texture Packer. I think it's become kind of a standard tool that people are using Texture Packer for sprite sheets and all that kind of stuff. And what is a sprite sheet but a bunch of bitmaps put together on one file for the most part, and we call them texture maps as well, where sometimes on the game dev perspective, we talk about textures. Textures are just images that are applied to the actors or game objects in a game. So we kind of did this last day, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these because I've actually prepared some stuff for you guys, and I put up on eCentennial. So just to make our journey a little quicker, I've gone and got some assets from the asset store, or my asset store, and I've put up a zip file, slot machine assets, and these are the ones that I used in the past for demos. So I'm going to share these ones with you, and we're going to switch to these assets in our project. So I'm just going to delete all these for now. I just wanted to show you how to do it, and then you can take your time if you really wanted to make your own, the way I've done it. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the ones that I have for my projects. So, because this way it just makes it a little easier, and it's kind of a complete set. So yeah. So here's my assets. Under images, I'm going to slot in some of these assets. So the assets that you can find are here. So if you download the zip file, so please go there and download it so we can work together on these things. It's going to help us with arranging stuff, and I wanted to, like, remember I said to you, I want to step you through this assignment. I don't want you necessarily to have to do it completely on your own. And the reason for this is because I think it's just good practice to follow step by step with me, and then later on you might have ideas of what you wanted to do on your own. I just want to make sure I'm in the right folder. No. Here we are. So I'm just going to drag and drop these slot machine assets, and I want to show you what they look like. They look like this. They have a bet line, they have buttons, they have a blank, which is kind of a blank GIF is what it is, and a bunch of PNGs. Some of them PNGs, some of them are GIF files. It's a mix and match kind of bag. And what we want to do is I want to use all this stuff, right? This is the original sprite sheet that I kind of put together. So if I open this up, I kind of made a sprite sheet that looks like this. This is a manual kind of put together, and I used Texture Packer to do this for me. So Texture Packer, that tool, I just dragged and dropped everything in here. It's a great thing about Texture Packer. So the way it works is you grab your assets. So let's say, for example, I have my banana, and I have my bar and my bell and all these other things. So kind of a bet line, and sure, my background image, which I probably wouldn't include. It's too big. I probably would include all the other stuff though. And slowly, I would kind of start creating all this stuff. right? That's what I would start doing. Okay, and then I would, let's get rid of my atlas. So let's get this, and then maybe buttons, because I want to get the buttons going too. So I kind of get all these buttons. Just gonna drag and drop all of them there so you can see them, and then maybe all these. All right. So what Texture Packer does is it creates a format where I can kind of pack all of these assets into one spot. Okay, that's what it's good at doing. So if I was going to use a sprite sheet as opposed to using multiple sprites, then I could definitely do something like looks like this. Okay, and I could choose a data format to work with. So let's say, for example, I was using Unity and I was going to make a game with Unity or Cocos 2D, which is a C++ framework, or Phaser, another JavaScript framework, libgdx, Java framework for Android, as an example, Corona, or let's not use Corona. It's called Corona SDK. And a bunch of other ones. You can see that this is compatibility with everything from CSS sheets to Easel.js, which is what we want to use right here. So this is Easel.js. So if I click Easel.js and click convert, what it'll do for me is it'll convert this into a format that I can export. And then I can choose the way I want to do it. I want to make it a basic sprite sheet. As an example, my maximum size I can specify. If I go to advanced settings with this thing, I can say that I want it so that it is power of 2, which is going to make kind of a square-ish sprite sheet. I can force squared if I want to make it completely squared, or not. It's up to me. I can specify a maximum size from a memory management perspective and a bunch of other stuff. And then I can export this sheet later on, and then I can use it. I'm not going to do that here today. I'm just going to use individual sprites because this is not the exercise to make a sprite sheet or make use of a sprite sheet yet. If we have time later on, I'll show you how to do this, but it won't be required for what you're doing for your file. But that's what Texture Packer does. The other thing that Texture Packer does really well is if I had that old sheet, I can just drag and drop it in here, and it'll help me split things up into different parts, components that we had before, and then it'll cut everything up for me and save the sprites individually. So if you had like evenly spaced sprites in a sprite sheet, it would cut it up for you as opposed to me doing it manually like I did last day. All right, so I'm not gonna do that right now. We got our images, and that's the most important thing. That's what I wanted from last time. And if I look at our stuff now, you're going to see under assets, let's refresh. Did I not get them? Maybe I didn't copy paste them. Maybe I forgot to do that. I did. There's assets, images, and sorry about that. I'll be okay. I'm just going to go into my courses, and off screen, I'm just going to drag and drop them onto this thing. So yeah, and I'm going to grab everything except for the atlas because I don't need that. So just copy and paste. Okay, so there's those assets that I talked about. These assets have been specifically designed by me so that they're equally spaced and everything else. So I've done some work, and I also have a background image I'm going to use for spacing and for adjustments. Okay. So now if I go here, you can see that there's the background image. This is where my what I'm going to use for my slot machine. You can also use this if you want to for your assignment number 4. Instead of you having to search out making your own, you can certainly use this. Or if you really don't like it and if you want to have your own style about stuff, it's totally cool to do. You can make it you can choose your own stuff. But here I've just found an image that I can use, and you can see that I've got spaces for a lot of different things I can use, right? So what I want to put these images that kind of start off here, and here is where the images are going to be, right? For this sprite sheet, or so for this image. One thing to note is that this part right here, which is kind of like this white area here, is something that I want to position my sprites on top of this, or my images, if you will, right on top of this every single time. So when I roll the button, when I click the roll button, it's going to just position these things right here. Okay, that's what I want. So first thing I want to take this bitmap and put it, I want to be able to position bitmaps in my interface. I'm going to do this over and over again. So just like last time, for me to do bitmaps by hand individually, I remember that last time what I did, and if I was to run this code the way it is, so if I run light-server, right, we did a couple things last day. We did kind of this, and of course now it's, last time it was working great. Today, oh yeah, because we've removed the image. I've gotten rid of the click me button, right, because I deleted it. So last day we did this, and I kind of talked about a button and as well as labels. We made a button and label image, and I got rid of everything. So now what I want to do is in my app.ts, which is up here, I want to create a manifest to load all those images I just downloaded. So these ones here, right? All these images, and notice some of they're a mix of things. GIF images, PNGs, a bunch of different things. Okay. There's even a generic button that's empty if I wanted to make it so that I wanted to put my own thing in there if I really wanted to, or if you wanted to put something in there. I've kind of given you enough leeway so you can do whatever you want with your design. Save you some time looking online and stuff is what I'm hoping. There's also a spin button and a bunch of other stuff. So I want to include some of this stuff in there, and I have the names because they're right here. So let's do that. But doing it like this inside of my preload function, I'm not sure if I want that. I want to make a manifest or an atlas, if you will, right? So let's call this manifest. So we'll say let manifest equal to an array, right? Here's an array of these things. Okay, so there's an array of these things. Here they are. And instead of my assets load manifest, I just want to assets load manifest. So manifest is going to be loaded from here to here. Notice if I hover over manifest, it detects it as a, it has objects. It's an array of objects that have ID and sources, right? This is pretty ugly, I would say, right, to do it this way. So one thing I want to do to give us good code hinting, just in case I mess up our manifest, right, is wouldn't it be nice if we had an interface with TypeScript to help me do some troubleshooting if I put the wrong stuff in here, right? Or if I missed an ID or a source or something. So manifest needs a manifest, which is just a string or an object or any. That's what it basically tells you. This is the requirements. If I hover over anything, any of these objects, it tells you what it needs. Some kind of string or object or any. Okay, we're going to give it an object that's going to define two things, ID and source. Okay, an ID and source. But again, what I can do instead is I create something called an item interface to help me. Okay, so we don't have that. Let's make it. So first I'm going to go and we have to look and see where it's going to go. Is it going to go in config? No. Is it going to go in UI objects? No. And it's almost like I should rejig my application a little bit to have a core folder as well as other folders that I'm going to use. So I'm going to make a core folder. Again, I'm just organizing again, core. And in my core folder, what I want to do, I'm just going to save this for a second. I want to drag and drop my app.js, my app.ts, and my app.js all inside my core folder. So I'm going to grab these files and drag them inside my core folder or move them in there. All right. I have to update the path in my index.html. So instead of it saying scripts app.js, it's going to be scripts.core/app.js. Okay. Which is also going to mess up some of these other paths that we're going to talk about in a sec. All right, so scripts core app.js is where it's going to be. In my core, I also want to include some helper functions, like, for example, this idea of an interface, this item interface. It's not really it wouldn't qualify as a UI object. It's kind of a thing that the UI objects would use, right? It's actually something that all the objects would use, right? So it's core. Anything that's core is part of my core API. Think of it that way. I'm making an API for myself, right? So, but it has to come before I use it. So it has to come before my app.js. And it's only going to be used by my app.js, so it could come right before my app.js, something that looks like this. So I'm going to say script source. I don't have this file yet, but I'm going to make it ./scripts. We'll do it the other way around. /core. And I'm going to call this thing, it's going to be called item.js. I don't have item.js yet, but I'm going to make it. So I'm kind of making it backwards this time around. Item.js is going to be in core. I'm going to right click and add a new file. I'm going to call it item.ts. And remember, it's not going to auto generate because I don't have my TypeScript transpiler working. To make it work, I have to press Control, Shift, and B, which activates TypeScript. I need to do that. If I forget, it's not going to transpile. Great, there's item.ts. Item.ts is going to be in my core folder. All right, core. I haven't done that for my app.ts yet. Okay, for now I'm just going to leave it in this iffy. Okay, but item.ts I'm going to put in core. So it's going to be in the core module core, right? And in my core module, I'm going to export an interface. That's what it's called. We're going to call it an interface. And the interface is going to be called item. Okay, the item interface. So what is an interface? Well, remember when we talked about this in maybe in C#, people who have me for C#, or you guys were working with C#, an interface usually is like an I something or another, an I drawable, an I enumerable, an I whatever. But you can also use interfaces in TypeScript to define structures to help you with troubleshooting. So for example, in this interface, this item interface, there's going to be two structures we care about. We care about ID, which is a string, and src, which is a string. That's what they're called. Let's use it that way. So ID, which is of type string. And we're also going to define a src, which is also a string. Okay, so that's it for the interface. That's all we have to do. And you're going to be like, wait, what? Why do I care about this? Well, here's the great thing about making an interface like this. There's zero overhead, which means JavaScript doesn't really do anything. Interfaces don't generate anything. So if I go back to item.js, you can see that there's literally nothing in my item.js. Nothing. And I've included a nothing file. But what it actually does is the item interface, which is inside my core folder, gives me good code hinting for the rest of my files. Okay, do I have to include it in my index.html? The answer is not really. There's no constructor for the item.js because it's an interface, but it does describe stuff in my app.ts. So in my app.ts, then what I can do is I can say that a manifest, right? My manifest is an object of type core.item. That's what it is. My manifest is an object of type core.item. And it says, yes, but it's a core.item array. A core item array. That's what it is. So an item array. That's what I'm basically saying this is. This is an item array. And the great thing about this now is when I hover over manifest, it says that it's a core item array. That's what it is. I just basically changed the type or the troubleshooting, the alert that I'm going to get from my manifest. If I have something wrong that's in here, if I try adding some other kind of object, it's going to complain. So if I mistype or something like that, it's going to help me. Okay. So let's try this out. So if I copy this, and by the way, this click me button isn't the one. I'm just going to go in order here. So background PNGs, I want to put that in there. So background, we're going to call it background, and we're going to say assets, images, background.png. So this is the first one, background.png. And we're going to make a little manifest this way. I'm going to make one at a time. I'm going to copy paste these objects. So the next one is going to be, we're going to make a friendly name. So the first one is going to be banana. And then it'll be banana.gif. Make sure that it's named properly. Banana.gif, and then bar.gif, and so on. Okay, so Gonna see how this works out in a second. Bar, not bar, bar, right? And the next one is going to be bell. Again, I'm showing you how to build my assets together, right? Bet line, bet line. Okay. Usually you want to have the ID, the friendly name for it, the same name as your actual file. That's pretty much common practice. All right. And bet one button, bet one button.png. Sorry. I meant to do this. Bet one button.png. And then I have a bet 1, bet 10, and bet 100. That's how I'm going to make my user have less options, so that I can more or less control what the user inputs. That's a good way of controlling it. I'm limiting their buttons, so they only have a few buttons they can press, and they can't enter data on their own. I think that would be a bad thing. Bet max means bet everything you can, maximum amount, right? Whatever that means. So bet max. So now I've got my bet buttons kind of going to be loaded. Again, I'm doing this in the exact same order that I'm seeing here. And this is really important because, and this is my blank. Now you're going to say, wait, a blank? Yeah. I mean, do I have to have a blank? No, but there might be a need for it if I want to layer things on top of each other. So a blank dot GIF. Okay. Cherry is the next one. Now you can see the advantage of me having one sprite sheet instead of doing it this way. Again, if I was doing a game course, then obviously that I wouldn't do it like this. I would do it with you differently. I would say, hey, let's make a sprite sheet. Here, you guys aren't game developers, so I don't need generic button. I'm not going to use this. Grapes, I'm going to use that one. Grapes.gif, right? Orange and 7. Orange, 7. So you can see I'm building up my manifest. And the last one is the spin button, .png. So spin button. Okay, so I've kind of defined what I have here. And this is a great place. I've got my item manifest. You can see that my it's an array of items, right? That's what it is. That's how this syntax means. It's of type. Manifest is an array of items. Core is the module that it's part of, the namespace. Okay, it's just a separator. So now when I kind of go in here, you can see that manifest is I'm passing in an array of items to the manifest. And there's going to be a bunch of items or assets inside of my assets object. You could also have called this, instead of item, you can call this asset. It's kind of the same. I just called it item. Okay, so cool. So we've got all these items here. And let me make sure there's a semicolon at the bottom because it's still an array. And by the way, this is initializer syntax for an array. I could have added each item separately. I could have created a container as an example that was different than this. This is one way of instantiating a bunch of items or creating an array, an item array with a bunch of items inside of it. I could have also made explicit use of a new keyword to allocate memory and so on. This is fine. All right, so once I've got this, let's put this up on GitHub. So I'm going to go here. These are the changes I made. And I'm going to say that, let's go to my PowerShell. I'll do it by hand this time. I'll say git add dot, git commit -m. I'll say I added new assets, right, is what I kind of did right now. And then git push. It's going to push this up to GitHub. So you'll have what I have, all right, at this point. if you're following along. All right, so this is good, but we need to change our user interface now, right? And the strategy would be to put this, to create some kind of game object, superclass, that I could use, because these are all bitmaps, right? So my game object superclass will have the following kind of components. One is going to be some kind of position, an XY component, right? It can be centered or not, similar to what we did with the with my my button class. Okay, so if you remember my button class, right? If I go back to the button class inside my UI buttons, or my UI objects, my button class kind of does everything I want that from my game object class to do, right? And in fact, my button would be a specialized game object, which is of type UI object, right? Well, or it could be a button. And why is that? Because it kind of is a game object of the type that I want. In fact, I can model my game object around my button, except the difference with my game, a regular game object, almost like a generic bitmap, if you will, and the button, is that it wouldn't have this. It wouldn't have mouse over, mouse out. But the rest, recalculate size, and all this other stuff, it would totally have. Like all the rest of the stuff would be valid, right, for a game object. So let's make a new object, which is in core. I'm going to call it game object, all right? And it's going to have all this stuff other than this. I'm going to modify it. And then what I'm going to get to do, the next step is make my button inherit from my game object. So I don't have to do all this stuff. I'm going to leave my label alone for this because my label, unfortunately, is a text object, right? So for me to make it a game object as well, which I could, it would have to have a text object inside of it, and that doesn't really fit the mold. There is another way of doing this, but I'm not going to do it here because we're not a game programming class. Okay, so let's make a new object in core. It's part of my core API, and I'm going to call this object a new file. It's going to be called game object. GameObject.ts. Again, I'm going to just copy paste the stuff that's inside of my button class. So I'm going to go to my UI button, my button. I'm going to select all, Control A, Control C, copy it all, go into my GameObject.ts and paste it in. Control V. Now I can't call it button because button's been taken. So I'm going to call this thing game object. Really, I could just say I'm done right now because the game object is like does everything the button does, except for it doesn't do this, no mouse events. So we don't care about mouse events for the button, for my game object superclass, right? I definitely have a bitmap asset. It definitely goes into the superclass because it is a bitmap. I do want to use recalculate size, which is a private member, right? Which does the things that I need to do, except I don't need mouse over and mouse out. These things are gone. Okay. So recalculate size, all this stuff would be part of my game object superclass, my game object superclass. And because I'm never going to instantiate an object of type game object, ever, this is just a blueprint for all other objects. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to mark this class as abstract. And this goes back to what we learned with C#. So it's an abstract superclass, which means this thing here will never be instantiated, all right? It will be used to be extended by other classes. Okay, in order for me to use this, first of all, I don't want to put it in UI object. I want to put it in core. This is where the module, it's going to be in the core module, which is important to note, okay? Because this is part of my core API, all right? It's not part of a UI object. It's not specialized. It's not a specialized game object like a button, right? It's a generic game object. Okay. Great. So I've got this thing, but I need to attach it to my code. I'm going to go to my index.html now, and I got to think, if I want my button to ever use this thing, it's got to be before the button. So after config globals, I'm going to put this other object. It's going to be a core script, but it's going to be a game object. So I'm going to say it's going to be standalone for now. So I'm going to call this, we're going to call this game objects. Okay, this is where they're going to go, up here. All right. And the first one is going to be my game object superclass. Right. So I'm going to say /scripts/core/gameObject.js. So this is where it's going to land, right here. Again, I'm creating my library by putting these things in the correct order, okay? Now that I have this here, theoretically, I can get my button class to inherit from my game object superclass, because my button is like identical to my game object superclass almost every way, except for its event handling. So if I go back to my my button class, instead of it extending my create.js.bitmap, I can make it extend core.gameObject. And because it's extending core.gameObject, and it says, hey, by the way, button incorrectly extends base class gameObject, types have separated declarations of private property M is centered, because you don't need all this stuff anymore. It's already included, so I can literally just get rid of all this, right? And furthermore, all I need to do from my game object is pass in because it does all this already, right? I just have to pass into my game object anything that I want that's going to go into it. For example, all this stuff is things I can pass along into my game object. So for example, I would just copy the constructor like this, right? And just pass it into my game object constructor like this, right? Now there's a couple things that you notice. My superclass requires a bitmap asset, right? That's what it does. So I don't have to mention what that is. I just pass in not the string types, but just the actual names. So X and Y, right? I'm just passing them forward, in other words, X and Y, and is centered, right? And this satisfies my requirements. So notice that my button class now does all this. I don't have to do any of this stuff because it does it for me. X and Y coordinates are going to be set inside my bitmap superclass. So I can get rid of these two things. And I definitely don't have to have recalculate size, because that is always going to be handled for me. So I can get rid of that. So now my button class looks a little sleeker. Why? Because I'm making use of the pattern that I've already created in my game object superclass. And all I'm doing is I'm passing my information from my constructor into my super constructor, which is the game object. That's what it is, which is almost identical to what I'm kind of getting up here. All right, so I'm getting X and Y coordinates, and I'm passing the X and Y coordinates into my super constructor, which are in turn being passed to the bitmap. Because remember, game object takes what I give it in my constructor. So it takes X and Y coordinates, and if it's centered or not from my bitmap, and it's kind of passing it in. It does all my calculations for me. And this is a base game object that all other game objects are going to be inheriting from. Button is a specialized form, which has mouse events. That's the only difference between a button and a game object. That's it. Okay. On that, then, if I did this, if game object is now the superclass, like the parent class, if you will, of button, and then in my app.ts now, I have all these potential game objects that I can put in that have, you know, all the same kind of properties that I can use here. So I don't have to, I can reuse my code as opposed to copying and pasting my code over and over again. So I'm going to create objects of type button. So these ones here are all going to be button types. Button 1, button, you know, my 10 button, my 100 button, my max button, all these things. Whereas these things, background, banana, bar, bell, blah, blah, those are all going to be game objects, right? Okay, but I've made game object abstract. I marked it abstract because I said, well, I don't want anything to instantiate game object. So if I did this, and if I said, well, you know, you have to make your own class, for example, some kind of actor class, right, that inherits from game object to make all these things. Almost like it's a game object, but it's another type of game object. It's a game object identical to this. Well, that doesn't make any sense. If my objects, example, and in a real game, maybe I would do that. Here, we're not making a real game. We're making a little example project for us to use. So I'm going to take the abstract class away. I'm just pointing it out. The reason why I put it in here is for you guys to know that, yes, I could have made other classes from my abstract class. And for example, I don't know, some kind of actor class. And the actor class itself would be something that I could put inside my game. Here, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put in, kind of this, I'm going to make it so that I can use the game object directly. So again, there's two types now. There's a game object, and then there's the button. And the button is a specialized form of game object. The other objects are going to use game object as their prototype, but the button is going to have, any other button is going to use the button type because it has events for mouse handling. That's the only difference. All right, so two types. Hopefully it didn't confuse you too much. All right, so now that I have that in there, what I can do is I can go into my app.ts and start thinking about how I'm going to scaffold this out. In my main in here, instead of making my click me button in Hola Mundo, I don't want to do that anymore. Can't get rid of all this, right? And we're going to start from scratch to make it easier, right? I'm going to get rid of some of these things up here, my hello label and my click me button for now. And what I want to do is I want to think about the first thing that I want to put on my stage, which is my background. So that's the first thing I'm going to put up, my background image. So background image is like my slot machine background, and it's this. So we're going to call this slot machine background. Let slot machine background be of type UI button, UI objects dot core dot game object. That's what it is, because it's not a button. All right, I'll be okay. So core dot game object. Okay, cool, nice. It's a bitmap basically. Excellent. All right. So now when I go down into my main, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say that slot machine background, right, is equal to a new core.game object. It needs the bitmap by default. So I'm going to give it the bitmap, which is going to be called background. That's what I called it. An X and Y coordinate. Now I know that I've made my screen, if I look at my index.html, I've made my screen 640 by 480. So I want it to be somewhere in the middle. So that means I want to center it around 320 by 240. That's what I want to happen. So in my app.ts, that's going to be my new position, 320 by 240, okay? Is it centered? Yes, it is. And I'm going to make it centered by saying true. All right, so that is going to be my background image. And then I want to add child. So I want to say that, hey, stage, let's add child this background image. Okay, that should be enough. That's all I need to make my background image appear theoretically on the screen. Let's see if that works. So again, I'm going to go back out here and boom, we're ready to go, right? Now, that's good. Let's put this up. So I'm going to put this up on GitHub. I'm going to say, okay, so I put my background image up on screen so you can do what I just did. I'm just going to put this up so you can follow my steps, all right? I'm just going to say added background image. Okay. And there we go. You're going to have that up online for yourself to look at. Okay, cool. So now that I have my background image, I want to layer on top of this. Remember, it's going to layer in layer order. It's like the painter's algorithm. I'm going to start off with the background, and then on top of the background, I'm going to have some other objects. We need a spin button. We talked about this. The spin button is going to be the central point of everything that I do. So this spin button here is what I want to add next. It's going to be of type button. So here, I'm going to go in here and say let spin button be of type UI objects dot button. So we're kind of differentiating between a regular background, which is a game object, and a regular game object and a button game object. That's what this is. Down in here, I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. I'm going to say that, hey, my my button, okay, which is my spin button, that's going to be equal to a new, and again, UI objects.button, and we're going to call this, the friendly name for it is spin button. Now, X and Y position, that's going to be something finicky. We haven't really planned where this is going to go, but my feeling is it should be somewhere over here. How would I do this to make it more accurate? Well, I recommend you use some kind of image manipulation program like Fireworks or Photoshop or Paint, or whatever you want. I'm going to open up my background. In fact, I'm going to open up all my objects. I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to go to my COMP125, and I'm going to go to my lesson 12. And these are absolute positionings that I'm going to do. So I'm going to go to Assets, Images, and I'm going to grab everything from here, load everything at once, except for, actually I'll load everything at once. So I can use all this stuff, right? Pretty much. And if I press open, it'll open all my files in different tabs, okay? And forgive me while I do this, okay? I want to show you. Again, you can use any program to do this pretty much. So here's my background image, and it's going to be relative to my background, okay? But think about this. Here's the top left corner of the image, right? And what I want is I want my my button to be relative to the top left corner of my background image, or in this case, it's going to be relative to the center from here. So where I want, let's get my spin button. So this is how I would do it. Now again, you can also trial and error it. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. So I want to grab my spin button. This is it. Copy it, and I'm going to go into my background. And again, we just have to do one and then just paste it somewhere. So this is where it's going to be. I want to make this so that the spin button sits somewhere like down here. Okay, and again, I'm positioning here in a paint program because this way I can get a sense of where it's going to be relative to the top left corner of this thing. Okay. And this is interesting. It says that my width and height is 60 for my image, right? But my position is 289 from the top left corner and 387 from the on the y-axis. So 289 to this way, and then down 387. Okay. We can make these numbers a little bit more even. So say let's make it 386. That looks a little bit nicer. So I'm going to nudge it to the right a little bit more if I'm going to put it there, because it looks like I'm going to have the same space from the top and bottom. So make this 290. So it looks like that might be better looking for my spin button, okay? And that's where my spin button is going to sit, right here on the corner, all right? But that is at, like I said, if I take a look at that thing, that is 290 and 386 from the top left corner, Wouldn't it be nice if I could make my spin button relative to my my background? Could. But really what I want is I want an offset from this middle. So instead of here, which is 320 by 480, right? That's what this is. I want to march across from 320 by 480 across. Instead of making it 290, it's half these numbers. So it's again, it's 145 this way, right? And then half of 386 down, because it's only half, right, from the middle, because I'm going from here to here, right? Kind of, right? So let's see if that works for me. So instead of going the whole 290 pixels, right, which is from here all the way to here, I can go only half that distance, theoretically, from here to here. Let's see how that works. I'm going to put it at 145 and half of 386, which is top of my head, I don't know. My brain is a little bit fried. 193. So 145 and 193. Let's see where that takes us, and if it makes sense. 145 and 193. So again, I'm going to put that in there. 145 and 193, and it's centered. If we're going to keep everything centered, we might as well center everything. Cool. And then I'm going to say stage Add child, and we're going to say that we're going to add in my spin button. Okay, but that means that everything is going to be relative to the middle of the screen, not to the top left corner of the screen, right? The middle of the screen. Again, it doesn't really matter, but at the end of the day, I'm just saying I'm going to move across by some of these numbers. Now, you're going to say, wait, Tom, this doesn't make any sense, because you want to add in, right, instead of subtract the way I've done it, you want to add. Now, this is actually going to be wrong, and you're going to see it, because the 320 by 480 is the middle of that. It's actually going to be the left. So let's see my calculations. We want it to be to the right of this by 320 and 240, right? So actually it's going to be even further along than what I said. So let's see what this looks like, which is here. You can see that the button is like way over here. It's correct if this was the middle, right? It's correct if that was the middle. That would be from here to about right there. But it's not the middle. This is the middle, which means we're going to add 320 and 240 to it. But man, if I was going to add 320 and 240 to it every single time, what a pain, right? I don't want to do that, right? I'm subtracting, I'm dividing by 2, which is what I'm kind of doing, and then adding. It's too much work, right? So let's make some numbers. We're going to say, center screen. We're going to make some local variables. We're going to say let center X, that's going to be equal to 320. And let center Y, that's going to be equal to 240. And then you're going to say, wait. What if I wanted to change my background size, Tom? And you'd be correct. I would say, yeah, you're right. That doesn't make any sense either, because then if I made my background, my width of my screen bigger, then I would have to readjust again and do more calculations, and that's not going to work, right? Well, we have a mechanism for this already. We have core inside or config. In my config, I have something called globals, right? And I could make another file called screen. So, or I can put it in my globals in here. Personally, I like to make like another class for my screen configuration. All right. So again, I'd make another file, a new file. We'd call this screen.ts. And my screen.tx is going to be part of the config module. Oh man, config, part of the config module. We're going to make a new class, right, called screen. And it's going to be, we're going to have a public static object called center X, which is going to be of type number. And we're going to set it to something, 320. And public static center Y, which is going to be 240. Now you're going to say, wait. Why would you do this? Because I have one place I can look. If I change these numbers here, it changes it everywhere, right? Which is pretty awesome if I wanted to do this. Center X and center Y. So screen.center X, screen.center Y is what I can do here, right? Now I need to put the config screen.ts inside of my index.html. So in my index.html, under globals, I can put that in there. So script source.scripts/config/screen.js. Now it's in there. I can access it. And then inside my app.ts, right? Instead of doing this business, I wouldn't do this. And instead of doing this, I can just say config.screen. Oh, this is wrong. Hold on, let me fix that. Screen should be screen, capital S, just keep in keeping with everything. Config.screen.centerX and config.screen.centerY. So this is not going to be something that's going to be hard-coded anymore. I can modify it somewhere else and it'll do what it's supposed to do. And the same thing is, I want to take my center X and center Y and add 145 and 193. So I'm going to say that config.screenX plus 145, config.screenY plus 193. And that's going to be the difference between making my buttons exactly where they're supposed to be, relative to the center of my screen. relative to the center of my screen. So anything to the right of my screen, I'm going to add to it. Anything to the left of my screen, I'm going to subtract from it. Okay. Again, there's other ways of doing this, but I'm trying to make it as understandable as possible. And we're not quite right. Look at that. We're a little bit down further than I'd like to be. I'd like to march back up. So the numbers are probably a little bit further out than I want. Again, this is relative to what I'm doing. Not terrible, but you can see that this is where I'm at right now. So I miscalculated a little bit. I probably want to march back about 3 to 5 pixels on the left. Let's do that. So I want to say, let's remove 5 pixels, so something like 88. Let's see what that looks like. Even more, maybe 80. So much for doing it exact. So that is the y coordinate. Let's go back, march up a little bit more. Let's go a 75 maybe, and then we'll see what the difference was. Okay, maybe a little bit more further down. All I'm doing is just changing the position of this button. Okay, now let's move it back. Actually, that's not terrible. I could probably leave it there because it might look stylistic if I put it there. But let's march it back the way I said. So this would be 135. Let's say 10 points. And that's right where it is. So 135 by 176 based on the center X and center Y values. And you can see that looks like a button. Okay. Again, you could also, eyeball it and do whatever you want to do. You can add, 240 and 480 or whatever, but this is relative to the center of the screen now. So that means if I change my position of everything, then so too would this change. An offset, if you will. Another way of doing it was to make my background a container and add my buttons as children of my background. That can't work right now because my background is just a bitmap, but I could make my background a different type of game object, like a container object. We're not going to do that. Okay, no. All right then, so that's code. So we're going to do this, slot machine background, and a spin button, and my spin button needs some kind of click event. So let's do that in there. So we'll say spin button dot on click. We want a function that it's going to be called. We're going to make it an inline function for now, but maybe what we'll do later on is call that spin function that I gave you guys as part of your starter for this thing. All right, so spin button is something that's going to be clicked on click, right? And right now it's enabled, right? Because we're not stopping it from being enabled in any way, right? We're just saying that, hey, if I hover over the spin button, I can do it. And let's just make it work. So I want to kind of do a console log here, and I'll say something like spin button clicked. All right, and let's try it out. So go here and let's look at my inspector, go to my console and click, right? And we can see that it's clicking nicely. So now we're starting our interface. And I always say this to people. I say, whenever you're planning something like this, build your interface first. And once you've built your interface, then add the logic behind it. Leave this the way it is, these buttons here, okay? Going back to this, we know that I was way off with my calculations. That's totally fine. From the top left corner. And why? Well, what I probably could have done is said, this is 375 and 480, and I'm calculating half of this, not half of my screen, which is where I went wrong. All right, so we've got our spin button. So we're gonna get rid of this. And the next one I want to do is I want to put in the other buttons, the bet buttons. So bet 1, bet 10, bet 100, and bet max. Let's go bet 1. Here's bet 1. And I'm just going to move this into place. So I'm thinking it should be some place like this. Bet 1. And I'm going to get rid of that. Again, I'm just going to try and create my interface first like this to try and plan it. I'm planning my interface. And then after I've planned my interface, I'm going to code my interface. So again, put in this bet 10. I don't know how close I want to put it right now. I'm going to put it right there. And let's get that gone and go into bet 100. So again, put that in place. That's kind of the center. It's telling me it's the center of the entire thing. something like that. And I may have to rejig these. And Bitmaps is the last one that I want to do. So again, here's Bitmaps. And by the way, I gave you this stuff because I didn't want to do all these buttons from scratch. It would just take too long. We waste too much time. Something that looks like this. And I think this one needs to move a little bit to the left, or to the right, I mean. So maybe something that looks, I'm eyeballing it right now. Obviously, I'm not really measuring it, but it looks like it's pretty good. Like this, maybe these buttons need to move a little bit to the left. So it's not going to be quite centered, but anyways. See how that looks if I move it to the left a little bit. And then maybe this one a little bit to the left for Bitmaps. And maybe more this one. And I'll give you my numbers when I'm done. Adjusting it by eye. That looks pretty good. All right, so kind of an even looking kind of thing. And I can't be exactly in the middle because this design is not probably centered exactly. So don't fret about it is what I'm saying. Okay, so this is what I want the object to look like for my spin button. Now, one thing to do is let's put this up on GitHub so I can show you the build. You can look at it step by step. So I've kind of added my spin button, added spin button at this point. Okay. And now let's add the other ones. Let's add my Bet1 button, my Bet10 button, Bet100 button, Bitmaps button. So let's Bet1 button, give type UI objects dot button, and I'm just going to copy paste a bunch of times. I'm going to add them all in. So Bet1, Bet10, Bet100, and Bitmaps. Those are the buttons. Cool. And now where would they go? So I want all of this for each button. So let's do the first one. We'll call this Bet1 button. Bet1 button. I will add this one into this. I'm just going to make a template, right? As an example. That's what I'm doing here. I'm making kind of like a template where that I can copy paste, right, for all this stuff. And we'll say Bet1 button. Oops. Bet1 button clicked. That's weird. Undo. Sorry. Control V. There we go. Bet1 button click. So this one is going to be Bet1. Now this is going to be position right. So now let's do the proper calculations. So the proper calculations are, and again, it's, if you think about this, it's if I march from the top left corner and this whole thing is 375, right? Then I want to march back half of 375, and then anyway, that's one way of doing it. We can also look at it from center screen now. So what's the difference between the center and where we are, right? So again, the center is not here, the center is here, that's 0, 0, right? So whatever value I get here, I'm going to march over this much and march back down this much, which is half of the height, half of the width. So half the width is 375 divided by 2. 75, where is that? Calculator. Calculator. Excel spreadsheet would be nice. 375 divided by 2. Right, so 187.5 is what I'm marching this way approximately. And then down, I'm marching, so that, let me keep track of that number. I'm going to put it into a notepad for now because I want to kind of add those numbers. So 187.5, let's say as an example, to the right. And then down is 280. So that's what the value is. So X is 175, Y, that's equal to 280, all right, for my my values. So what I want to do is I want to march back, right, when I come to this point here. So whatever that value is, subtract it from the middle. So if this value here, this is all centered, right? So if I look at the button right now, it's 22x and 387 relative to 0, right? 22 and 387, right? So then let's think about how I would calculate that on the way back, right? So I'm going to go to the left, right? If my left is all the way back is 187, I want to add 22 to it. So I'm going to say that my first button is 187.5, and I want to say minus, or I can do it the other way around. I can say that it's minus 187 plus 22, right? And that's going to be the relative to the center of the screen. All right, that's what my x coordinate's going to be, right? Because that's what this is saying, right? 22 this way, right? And y is going to be 387 down. So that's going to be, and again, I'm going to go march all the way back plus this, right? So I'm going to say that march all the way back, so minus 280, so 280 up, and then plus, right, as an example, 387, plus 387. And that's going to be my new position for my button. Does that make sense? Because I'm marching back from the center. That's what I'm doing. Relative to the center is what I'm trying to do every single time, right? Let's see how this works. So the answer is, for this one, I'm going to say, I know it's not that complicated, but minus 187.5 plus 22, which is 165, negative 165.5. I can't do 0.5, so it's going to be slightly not exact, right? And this one is minus 280. So it's going to take me back to the top. Minus 280. That goes back to the top. Plus 387, right? Plus 387, which is roughly 107. And that's going to be my new coordinates for my next button. Let's see if I'm right. Minus 165. I'll make 165 and 107. Minus 165 and 107. Okay. Again, instead of doing absolute coordinates, I'm going to use the same thing. So I'm going to say center x minus 165, right? So it's going to march back. And center y, now this is incorrect, right? So because this works, my x coordinate works. So if I was going to do this, let's just try one at a time and see if it gives me my x coordinate correctly. So let's see what that does. So yeah, so my x coordinate is perfect. Look at that. That's exactly where it should be. My y coordinate is right too. From a low, actually my x coordinate is not right. My y coordinate is right because I'm making it the same as this one. I already have my y coordinate. I just want to move over x a bit more than what I did, right? So this is incorrect. Let's just eyeball it and do it that way. I'm working too hard here. So I'm thinking it's about 20 pixels or so to the right. So let's add 20 pixels to this. So instead of this, 145 is what I'm thinking it might be. More, 135. Yeah, it's probably about right. Okay, so there's my bet one button. If I click onto it, you can see that these two buttons bet differently. All right, so going with this then, I'm going to add button width plus margin to this thing, but keep this one the same. The 176 is going to be exactly where it's going to be. That's not going to change. But this X value is going to change as I march the buttons across. All right, so let's just do this. So I'm going to say copy paste, and this will be bet 10 button. And you're going to say, why didn't you do this from the beginning? I don't know. It's my brain the way it's working today. All right. And I'm not trying to do too much planning here because you guys aren't a game dev class. All right. So one thing to note is how big these buttons are. So I think it's important to know that. So that's 60 by 60. So 60 wide. So I'm going to add 60 to this plus a margin of, let's say, 10. So 60, so that's 95, plus another 10, that's 205. That's the wrong way. I'm actually going to do the other way around. Sorry. So 60. So that's 1. God damn it. 135 minus 60. Where is that calculator? 135 minus 70, let's say. 70. 65. And let's see how that looks. Not there, but here. Okay, it's a little bit too wide because my design tells me it should be closer. But let's see if I can move this to the left a little bit later. So that's pretty good. If I click this bet 10 button, bet 1 button, spin button, they all work pretty good. Let's put the bet 100 and bet max, and we'll figure out the rest. So bet 100 and bet max. Guys, bear with me. I mean, I'm trying to show you what I would do, you know, kind of live. So, you know. But the first thing I would do, I think the lesson from this thing is, what I'm trying to do is make my, you know, kind of make my interface first, right? Okay, that's what I would do. Make my interface first. Let's see if that is positioned correctly. Probably not, but because I was at 65, I said it would be 70 back. So let's see if that works. Yeah, it's not bad, right? So these are pretty good. And one more, which is my other button. I mean, you can figure it out from the other ones, right? So bet max. Right. Okay, so these are all in place. And now it's going to be an additional 70 the other way. So this is 75. And 75 and roughly 60 is 135. So we're going to be really tight, actually. We have to move all this a little bit to the left. But let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so this looks like this is going to nudge to the left, maybe 5 each. So that's fine. So we can do that. So march to the left. That means this would be 70. This would be 0. So almost exactly like we calculated. This one would have been in the middle. And this would be 60. And 135 will keep the same. $10 should march back. 10, bet 10. Bet 10? What happened with bet 10? I do the other way around. 50. No, I meant the other way. 70. I'm subtracting. Add 5 from this one. So this would be minus 65. Less, minus 67. Now I'm being nitpicky. And this one should probably come over to the center a little bit more. Bet max should come over this way, to the left, by maybe a few pixels. I'm eyeballing it, guys. It looks pretty good. Okay, it's not perfect, but you know, you can see now that the buttons all work. Bet 10, bet 100, bet max, and then spin. Okay, I'm gonna put this up on GitHub. So added the rest of the buttons. So added the rest of the bet buttons. All right, so again, add all those in there and push. So you have all those commits. So we have an interface, right? So again, now I'm going back to you guys. Are you getting it, what I'm doing? I'm just positioning my stuff relative to my screen. Now this, again, this is relative to the center screen. If I was to change the center to something else, or if my screen space was larger or smaller, then my hopes are that this would all shift as well. Okay. Diego says yes. I got Joseph positive. Anyone else? Are we watching? Anyone not understand? I want to see that, because if you're not understanding, I want to try and help as much as possible. That's what we're here for today. I'm just positioning stuff. All right. Looks like everyone else is good. So now that we have our buttons in place, this is our controls. These are our interface controls, right? Because we can press one of these things and there's no logic behind any of this. I wouldn't mind if there were labels here, 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 and here, because this is where we're going to output data. So here, 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 and here are going to be labels. And then here, 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 and a bet line is going to be where I'm going to position my jackpot. Okay. So let's try that. So I need a label up here, right? And this is roughly in the middle, but down a bit. So it's going to be called the jackpot label, right? And we're going to write the number 99999 across here, okay? So let's do that. So we're going to go to the top, and we're going to say jackpot label. Let jackpot label is equal to of type UI objects dot label. Okay. And I'm going to position it. Now notice the order. This is very important, guys. I want definitely my slot machine background to be first. So this is like layer order, right? And then down in here, so these are all the buttons. Let's make some, let's put some comments here. So these are all my buttons. Slot machine background. Labels. Okay, this is where my labels go. And now we're going to do the first one, which is the jackpot label is equal to a new UI objects dot label. We're going to make this, we're going to call this something like 999999. So 6 nines, let's say. And the font size, let's try 20 pixels. I don't know if that's right. And let's try Consolus. Might be Terminal we might want to use instead. And my font color, let's make it red. So RGB, so FF0000. And is it centered or not? My X and Y coordinates are important. So this is going to be center X, so config dot screen dot center X, center of the screen, looks like. And I'm not sure what the value is going to be down, but I'm thinking probably like 100 for now. And definitely, centers. Let's see how that looks with this. Okay, oh, one thing we're missing, of course, is add child. Let's do that. So stage dot add child jackpot label. And it's too far. It's down here. Let's move it. Let's march it back up by 50. Maybe less than 50? Yeah, that's not bad, eh? 65 is where it's going to go. I could probably fit in another digit in here. I'm using 9s because I want to see how much room I can fit, how many numbers I can fit in. Let's put another 9 in there, and let's see how that looks. That's pretty good. I can probably fit even one more 9. So the maximum value I can have in here is something that looks like this. That's pretty good. So that's the size of my jackpot. And I think these are all roughly, this, and this are all the same size. So this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think I got 8 values in here, right? 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So this I'm going to do the same thing with the other ones. So let's put the credits label and the winnings label next. The bet label is something else. So let's credit label be of type UI objects dot label. Let winnings label be of type UI objects dot label, and let bet label be of type UI objects dot label. That'll be the last one I put in. But credit label, winning label, I want to put in there as well. So let's put those in the right place. So credit label is this. Credit label. And we're going to put in the same value, but again, instead of screen center X, what we want to do is we want to march back from the center approximately, I would say, Again, I'm eyeballing it, but I'm thinking it's going to be something like 100 pixels. Let's try that. So minus 100. And we're also going to go down a bunch of pixels. So it's going to be below center. So it's about here. And we're going to go down about another, my thinking is about 150 pixels. So center Y plus something. Plus 150, I'm guessing. Okay, I'm not going to even bother with the calculations anymore. I'm just going to do it and then see what happens. All right, so cool, add credit label, and where is that? Oh, it's too low, but not bad in terms of positioning. So I want to bring that up a little bit more. Let's bring it up to 30. More. Even more. Not bad to the right, which means subtract less. A little bit more. And maybe march it up a little bit just for centering. So 107, I would say. Looking at that one and looking at this one, maybe 108. I don't know what looks better, 107 or 108. I think 108 looks better. And looking at I'm eyeballing the space here and the space here. I think I'd like to march it back a little bit more. So maybe minus 94 instead of 93. There you go. That looks pretty good. So that's the label where it's going to go. Are you with me so far? So all I'm doing is I'm just doing these X and Y calculations. So I'm moving the actual object exactly where it's supposed to go relative to the center. I'm going to try and keep it relative to the center as much as possible. I didn't really do that for this one, my jackpot label. I could have subtracted, it's the actual absolute position. I probably should fix this later. All right. Next, let's do the other label. So now the winnings label, right? It's called winnings label, right? Winnings label. Again, this is all in the pursuit of trying to make a balanced user interface. Because if I have your user interface, now it's a matter of you just using the code that I gave you, and you should be better. Okay, so it's going to be the same y coordinate because it's going to be down the same level, but the x coordinate's on the other side. So now my estimate is let's add 94 instead of subtract 94 from the side and see what happens there with this one. That's not bad, right? Because I know I made this interface kind of balanced. So that was cheating. I cheated a little bit because I knew that this was my interface is kind of balanced in its way, right? In terms of this. Now this is where it's going to be a little bit tricky, where I need to put my bet label in there. So bet label. Okay, here's my bet label. It can't be 9999. There's no way that 9999 is going to fit in there. Let's maybe half of those numbers, like this much. 20 pixel looks good. This is good. And center X is definitely, I want to try just center X by itself first with the same Y coordinate. And maybe it's too low. Yeah, there we go. That's pretty good, right? So that's what I did. So now I've got all my labels. Again, these are the values that I got in here, right? Not happy with this one. We should probably fix this one because we're making everything relative to the middle except for this one. So let's fix it. I know I'm loath to do it as well, but you got to figure 65 down, and I'm adding, 240, right? So I'm going at 240, and I want to go to 65. So it's going to be minus 240 plus 65 is what it's going to be. So my calculations have been terrible up to this point, but whatever. So 240 minus 65. So it's going to be minus 175. Okay, let's see if that's right. So center Y minus 175. Again, all relative to the center. Minus 175. Okay, cool. That worked. So that's all right. Now, why relative to the center? Because now if I wanted to rejig the position of my slot machine or whatever, I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be offset. I can offset it and I can change my size. You might have a different size for your slot machine or a different image, and it would be kind of the same. This is I just want to show you my thinking around this. Okay, so now my labels are done. Let's put them up on GitHub. So I'm going to say added labels to slot machine. All right, so ba-bam, and push. Guys, guess what? Our user interface is mostly done. Now all I have to do is put our some placeholder graphics, right, for my slot 1, slot 2, slot 3. So what I want now, and this is the thing, I want to take an example. Let's look at the banana. Here's the banana. And what I want in my background is for the banana to be positioned pretty much, you can see that it's not going to be, it's about the same size of this. It's got to be positioned right on here. So right in here. So I'm going to put blanks in here, blank, 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 right? And I'm going to swap out the image, whatever the images are, to show me the thing. It's going to be right on top of everything else. So this is going to go after everything else is going to be, this is where it's going to be, right? Again, it's to the left of center. It's not going to be a bad calculation for the left one. This is the left real, the middle real, the right real, all right? Left, middle, right, okay? Or you can call it real one, reals, you know, whatever it's going to be, right? So let's go, let left real be of type core.gameObject. Let center or middle real be of core.gameObject, and let right real be of type core.gameObject. Okay, so this is where this is, to the right, left, middle, and right. Now let's position them inside of here. So these are the real game objects. And these are just placeholder. Okay, so I want to use an actual image, not the blank. The blank is going to be something that I want to pop in there as an object, right? So, okay, so now let's think about this. I'm going to say left real is equal to a new, let's start with the left, a new core.gameObject. It's going to be called, we're going to use banana for all of them. All right, for now. This is just our placeholder. My X position is going to be the middle. Let's take this information for now. That's me, the middle. And it's going to be centered. All right, so that's how easy that is to do. And then stage.addChild, and then left real. Okay. Cool, left real. And I want to see how that looks on top of everything else. So it's just like literally that easy now. Let's go back and see how that looks. So that's right in the middle, right? So that's not what I want. I want it to be over here. So again, how big is this object and how much space is in the middle? Well, this object is 69 by 69. That's an interesting number. And let's march it back at least 69 this way. And then plus a gap of about 5. The way to do that, of course, would be to, okay, so what is this position? So the middle position looks like it's 152 by 197 on the x-axis, 152, let's say. And I want to go from 152 to 74. So 152 minus 74, that's minus 78. All right, maybe that's the better way to do it, huh? Minus 78. So this will be center x minus 78. Okay, so minus 78, and that's where it's going to march back the banana on the left. So if I go back to this, now you can see the banana on the left. It's not quite right. It sticks out just a touch. Let's see if I can go 79. There is a bit of an offset because we're doing it on the web, and maybe That might look better slightly. It's going to stick out a bit. It's not going to be perfect, guys. I'm so sorry. Maybe even I would make these graphics just a tad smaller. Like, you know, I would scale them in by, I don't know, 1%, something like that if I was going to do it. For now, let's leave it as is. It's probably good enough. And I want to put another one there and another one there. It looks like also the middle. I'm not sure that that image looks like it's in the middle, but that's okay. Yeah. So let's put the other bananas in there too. So I want to put in the other bananas in. So we'll do the other ones. So left reel. And this will be the middle reel, or I call it middle. Yep. And middle reel would be just in the center, roughly. I would have to adjust it a little bit. And the right reel. Okay, right reel is going to be to the right of the center plus 79, let's say. If I design this properly, and I think not quite. All right, let's see what that looks like. It's not terrible. I think it needs to this one needs to march back a little bit. Let's go back to this. Sorry. I'm going to go back to this, and instead of 79, we'll add 78 to it. Yeah, and this one should be, it's kind of in the middle. I don't think I can get it better than that, to be honest, if I march back by 1. Again, it's all relative. I don't know. 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I always say. It's kind of almost perfect. I don't know. Let's leave it up as center. Yeah, it's the same. Doesn't matter. It's not perfect. The sizes are not quite right. And let's replace those images with other images to try them. So let's try a bell instead. And let's try, instead of a bell, let's try a bar over here. Right? That's how it's going to be. So it looks like it's a little bit low. Like I would want my bar to be higher up. Right? So I think that the way I position this, it needs to march up probably around 5 pixels. Let's march it back by 5. And I say march back, I'm just subtracting 5. Okay. More. A little bit of trial and error. Sorry, guys. Better. Maybe even more. Maybe even more. So I'd do, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12. That's pretty good. And then I want to put the bar in, which is the kind of the bet line. So bet line. Okay. So another object, let bet line is of type core.gameObject. And so this would be bet line is equal to a new. I'm just going to copy all this. Sorry, running out of time. And this will be the bet line. I think it's called bet line. Yeah. And this is definitely correct, but I think this has got to be, yeah, centered like that. Centered. And this will be bet line. And what that will do is it'll make it look like that these objects here are behind the bet line. Now the bet line could probably move up with everything else about a pixel, because you can see that clearly now. Look, here's where the thing is. This is where the arrow is, maybe a pixel up. So I even go higher by like 1, all of them. Yeah, right? That's about right. We have our interface, guys. This is great. We have our interface, and we have this pretty cool, right? It wasn't that painful. but this is the first part of what you'd be doing. So I built it for you. So now you can use this. What your job is to link some of the code together. And that's going to be the challenge. I'm going to help you before we go. I'm not going to like leave you go, fly, and try yourself. Yeah, there's still more to do. So we're going to talk about how to do it and how to make this better. So here I'm going to say that I added placeholder images. Actually, we'll say reels. We'll say reels and betline. Reels and betline. Okay. Cool. So this is great, but it's pretty cluttered the way this is, right? And this is my user interface, right? And because this is a great thing that I've done here. So because I've done all of this up here, so all these functional scoped variables, it means they're available anywhere, which means that I can refactor all of this and take all this stuff and put it into a method that I can hide away. So I can kind of right click and I want to refactor this, or I want to extract. There's actually an extract way of doing this. I want to extract this. It says extract inner function to in function main, right? Extract to function in global scope. Sure, we'll do that. And we'll call this function. Yeah, no, that would be bad. Undo. Nah. We'll do it ourselves. We'll call this new function build interface, right? That's what we'll call it. And we'll call this function above main function build interface, which will return void. And that's this. And the reason why I did this way is I can just literally just fold it up now. I don't have to look at it anymore. But here's my main, right? And we should see the same effect. Nothing much should happen. We should see the same. Okay, cool. Let's do a couple things to practice with code. So these buttons, I built my interface and these buttons are not part of the interface, right? So what I want to do now is I want to remove all the logic from the ons, right? So I'm going to copy paste again. It might be just faster. Okay, so copy paste all this, my buttons, all of them, including everything, put it back. And we're going to build, we're going to call it interface logic. So a new function called interface logic. And interface logic obviously has buttons as well as event listeners. I'm just going to leave the button logic in there, but get rid of the buttons. So I'm going to separate the logic from the interface. So then all I think about is the logic. Because that's all there is, right? There's a spin button, a bet 1, bet 10, bet 100, max. That's it. That's all I have here so far. There's some buttons that are missing in your interface. One of them is a reset button that I've asked you to do and a quit button. I'm going to let you guys do a couple of them. Sorry. I know this is a lot of work for you, but you need to do something on your own. So hopefully you guys can manage there. Interface logic can also be called interface controller. This would be the view, right? And this would be the controller. We're just going to call it interface logic because so you guys know what this is. But this is a controller. That's what this is for all this. And now we have access to this. Now we want to remove that from up here, right? Because then I have all these. I don't need them in two places. If that makes sense. Okay, so, and again, it's easier to destroy than to build. Right, much easier. Because otherwise, if I was to try and do this by typing or copy pasting, it's just easier just to do this. All right, cool. So we separated our interface from our control. Here's our control. And now we can hide the interface. We can just say, okay, I don't need this anymore. I just need this now. right? All right, so here's what I want to do. When I click my spin button to test the interface, I want to test my interface, and this is where I'm going to leave it for today, right? I want to swap out my button's logic, right? So spin button click. I want to swap out the button logic, the images for the buttons, to something else. Okay, this is important to note. How do you do this? We'll start with the left image. So we'll say the left reel dot. It has an image object, right? And what we want is we want to make this equal to a new image, right? And we want to with a height and width, right? So let me go back to that. So image itself, right? Just bitmaps have images, right? And if images looks like it's a create.js bitmap image, which is either an HTML canvas element, an HTML image element, an HTML video element, all right, that's what you want. Okay, so bitmaps have images, and if you look at the code, the documentation under easel.js, you want to swap out the image. Now, where is the image being stored, right? In order for us to swap it out, that's the thing we have to look at. So if you look at bitmap, then if you look at the under index, you're going to see that these are all the properties of the image. We have an image property, and we have an ID, we have a name, scale. We can rescale stuff if I want to. Stage. These are all the areas where you can do stuff. And these are some methods. I can add an event listener. I can also do on or off. So add event listener is actually a thing I can use if I like to use that. Hit test is visible, get bounds. All these things are part of the image. But I want to swap out what I want to see to something else. So if I click on image, it says that source image to display, this can be a canvas image source, image, video, or canvas. An object with a getImage method that returns a canvas source, or a string URL to an image. Look at that, string URL to image. If the latter, a new image instance with the URL as its source will be used. Could I not then say that my image is equal to assets.getResult, and then pop in something like, for my left reel, let's make it a 7, right? Because a 7, right? Here's my 7 right here, right? Now it's giving me an error. And this is where TypeScript comes in play. It says, object is not assignable of this type, right? It's not of this type. Because really what we're doing is we're saying this. We're saying that the left reel image is a new image. That's the thing to do. New image, capital I. And image bitmap, you can also use that too. That's fine, whatever you want to use. But even that is wrong. See, it says like, wait, it's looking for a HTML image element. Okay. Could say then that document.create element. I want to create an image element. That's what it's saying, right? I want an image element. And my, we'll call this let left equal to this, right? And then what I want is left.source, remember source, to equal to that path, which is assets.getResult. And then we'll say 7. Okay, that also has issues because we're expecting a string and it's not happening. All right, I'm just pointing out the problems here, okay? First of all, let's see what it does. If I say, okay, so this is my document, it's this thing. Does it take left as an image? Can I just do is equal to left? Let's see if that works. So yeah, so that kind of accepts left because left is an HTML image, right? It takes HTML image, HTML canvas element, HTML video element. Those are the 3 things that image property takes. One of those 3 things. Fortunately, this does not like this 7 get result thing, right? Source is not happy with what I'm trying to do, all right? Let's try it anyway and ignore the error and see what happens. So if I click on the button, the idea is that when I click on the spin button and then do this, and it says, no, you're trying to do something with the image element and it doesn't know what you're trying to do. It says object HTML image element. because really my left is an image element I'm trying to add in. It also says, though, in the documentation, and I'm just trying to point this out to you because you want to replace the images, the first thing you want to do. In the documentation, it says image can be a canvas image source, image video canvas, and an object with an getImage method that returns the canvas image source or a string URL to the image. Okay. What if I just ignored all of this and I just said, okay, well, I want this, even though I'm going to get an error, to be this, right? So I'm just going to comment this out for a second. I'm getting an error, but remember, there's reasons why, right? So spin, that worked, right? So that's what I want. I want this, but I'm getting this freaking error, right? And why am I getting this error? Because what it's doing is it's saying, this is where, and I have to be honest with you, sometimes we get our code hinting support and it's not perfect. It's not perfect. I can cast this thing to make it so to make it so that it is less complaining. I can say as, and I can cast it as something else like a HTML image element, HTML image element. I could do this casting just to stop it from complaining, right? And then again, if I click spin, it works, right? So that you could do this. I mean, I'm not really a fan of this thing, but that's the thing that happens. I'm just pointing this out because, and I'm just showing you how to replace images. You need to know how to replace images because that's what you're going to do, guys. You're going to replace images as an example whenever I click stuff. So what I want is when you click the spin button, somehow to get the right thing in here, the get result, so that I can middle reel dot image is equal to assets dot get result, and we'll say that the 7 is also going to be something in the middle. We'll just as HTML image element, and the right reel dot image is equal to assets dot get results, and then we'll say it's also 7 cast as an HTML image. And that, my friends, will do what I wanted. So here's what it started off when I click spin, and boom, I get 7s, and I can replace whatever images I want. Guys, this is the key to making this whole thing work, right? Because really at the end of the day, you want to supply yourself with some images, and the logic is going to be right in here. Okay. Now, for you, your job. I've done my job. I've built my interface, the interface for you. I've given you an example. So this is an example of how to replace the images in the reels, right? Now, here's what you need to do. Remember what I gave you before was some logic for this slot machine. So slot machine logic, I don't need this anymore. So build my interface. The slot machine logic is actually right in here, right? So I've given you that logic. Here's the slot machine. And let's look at the JS and main. We'll open this up with code for a second. So I kind of said this, right? I want to roll, and this reels function, I mean, really, I can transport this whole reels function. So when I click the button, right, it already has some functionality here. And it says blank, grapes, banana, orange, cherry, bar, bell, and 7 with caps. So to be smart, right, I want to take these results. I want to actually transport this entire function. Let's just do this part, okay? I want to transport this entire function, okay, this entire function out of here, copy. I want to go into main, into my app.ts, right? And what I want to do is I want to have a reels function in here. So there's something like in here, okay? Again, I can't do it all for you because, you know, I'm trying to help you, but to some degree. And this is my function. We'll just space it in a little bit. There we go, spacing it in. It doesn't know check range. Let's put that in. So check range again is, I'm going to go back to my my main.js, this one, and let's get check range. Check range is right above it. So your little utility function, which is going to be right above this. I'm literally copy pasting, guys. I'm not doing anything different here. All right. So here's my check range. Now this thing's not complaining. Blanks, grapes, bananas, and oranges, and blah, blah, blah. These are just tallies. That's what I'm doing here. Okay. So I can copy paste, worst case scenario, everything that's in here. So this is all these. I don't recommend this. You're better off doing some kind of other thing, but I'm putting this in as is. I'm transporting it as is into this application. Remember, you've been hired by a company. That's the use case scenario, right? To update their little dumb application to something that makes more sense. Okay, so these are, we'll call these variables, symbol variables, symbol tallies. All right, that's what they are. So that's what these do. This just tally how many symbols you have right here in the bet line. This is ready to use. I can use this right now, right? When I spin this, it's going to output a bet line. It's going to return the bet line, which is a string. Let's update this. So this is a string. It's going to update a string. Value, right? My check range, lower bounds and upper bounds, they're all going to be numbers, right? So when I use this, these must be numbers, numbers. And the return is going to be a number. Okay, so that's what this does. So if I go to here, to check range, you can see now it's a bunch of numbers that I'm checking, local function. And it says that, however, if my check range, notice that this is a funky thing. So I'm either going to return a value, if value is greater than lower bounds and value is less than lower bounds, return the value, otherwise return not value. What? This can't do this. This is a function that does either a number or a Boolean. Okay, we can do that. Number or Boolean. That satisfies requirements, guys. This is one thing you can do with TypeScript. You can return two different types, value or a Boolean, depending on what you have here, which is what this is going to do. Okay, cool. All right, but then we get down here and we say, blah, 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 blah. This doesn't make any sense, right? Because it's supposed to return a bet line. And the bet line is not a string, but rather a string array is what it's going to return, a string array. Okay, string array. Again, I'm just updating what we had. Bear with me, guys. I know we're over time. Bear with me. I'm trying to help. Cool. We have pretty much everything we need. When I click my roll button, I want to change these things. And these things are blank, grapes, banana, blah, blah, blah. Let's change these to lowercase. Everything lowercase. Orange, cherry, bar, bell, and 7. Okay. Blank, grapes, banana, orange, cherry, bar, bell, and 7. Okay. Cool. So what I want to do when I click this is I'm going to say spin button clicked, and we're not going to do any checks right now. This is not going to satisfy the requirements of your assignment. This is just going to make the reals thing work. So here's our test, a real test. And we're going to say that it's going to say, hey, reals, right? I want to generate a string array. So we're going to say, and this is for real 1, real 2, real 3, string array, where I want, we'll call this reals. So let reals is equal to reals. This is going to be a string array, right? And then I can say that instead of 7 being hard-coded, I can just say reals 0, reals 1, and reals 2. And that would give me most of what I need to at least generate the results. Let's see if this works at all, or if I'm crazy. All right, so spin, spin, spin. Spin. Yeah. Now there is absolutely no logic that's going to stop you from spinning. You still need to do the credits, the bet winnings, and the jackpot. If you just give me this, I'm not going to accept it. I've given you everything that you need, right? I want you to make the logic work. That's the part that you need to do on your own. Because I've given you everything, really, at the end of the day, right? I don't need this anymore because this does what it's supposed to do. So far, it doesn't calculate winnings, but you can see what I did. I've just ported over the reals function and everything else as is. All you need to do is when you need to put some logic in place. So when you bet something, you have to check to see that it does what it's supposed to do. So the user can't have a bet and it's got to be disabled. So the button can't work somehow without him having or her having money. If there's no credit, can't bet. Right now I can bet unlimited and it's just going to keep betting forever, right? What we've done is we've built the interface and we've got some basic logic in the background. The only logic I filled in is the spin button .click. That's what it is. So here, this is what I've given you. I've given you the ability to do this. This is kind of fun, but there's a couple things that are missing. The winnings, the bet, the credits, the jackpot, all this stuff has to be still wired up. That is going to be your job over the next week or so, okay? I can help you on Monday and Wednesday, right? If you have a problem figuring this stuff out. But this is your true starting point. I've given you a lot of the code already. Your job is to figure it out. So when I click something like this, that's a win, right? This is a lose because I've got 2 blanks, okay? So again, if I refresh, starts off like this. Hey, let's test this online before you guys go. So again, what I want to do is I'm going to go back to here and I'll say added real logic. Just basic real logic is what I did, right? It's not complete. Added real logic. I'll say basic. Just to make sure that things roll. They just do something. There's no animation here. It's literally image swapping is what we're doing at this point. All right, so I'm going to add this and check this and then push. And that is part of what your assignment is about. It's a large part to get going. You still need to do the other stuff. And I'm hoping that you followed along this tutorial because there's some free marks involved here. I'm going to give you free marks if you complete everything, right? But I'm meeting you halfway. Okay, this is like my halfway point for you, all right? So that way you need the rest to do the rest, okay? So let's put it up on GitHub and see what happens. So if I go to GitHub and I look at Centennial, and I want to look at this lesson 12 thing, and I want to look at this, I want to publish this package. I'm going to go to settings, and I'm going to scroll all the way down, and let's see that it's already published. So it's here on GitHub pages. Let's take a look. And yeah, it produces it. There it is. You can actually go and check it out. And if you click spin, then you're going to have some results to try. All right, that gives you 90% of what you need to get going with. I don't think there's a lot more left for you to do in terms of making it work. There's some modernization you have to do in terms of changing the label. So the text, you have to set text, make sure that you set text in the labels when you set the labels up, and keep track of things like the jackpot. Those are actual number values, but for the most part, partially work. I got partial power, Captain. Partial power. All right, questions for you guys before we go. I know I did a lot for you, and I'm really happy to do it because I want you guys to get a sense of I'm building an interface. This is the first application that you're actually building. This is an app, right? Why? It has nothing to do with the DOM, guys. There's no DOM manipulation here whatsoever. It's all code. Remember? And this is the culmination of what I wanted to do with you this semester. Why? Look. If you look inside of your index.html, there's literally 0 HTML elements except for this one, the canvas. Sorry, there's the canvas element. There's no CSS. There's no Bootstrap, Font Awesome, nothing. It's all code. The entire thing is a code. This is the first web application you're making, and you're going to make more next semester. Good luck on your assignment number 4, guys. If you need help, I'm going to be with you guys. Hopefully you guys are going to get all kinds of great stuff. I'm sorry. I know it's intense. but this gives you a lot of the stuff to get going with. I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to, you've got it up on GitHub, and I'm going to stop recording, and I'm going to take some questions from the people that are here. Thanks, and I'll see you guys on Monday. So let's end the stream.